Hello and happy upcoming St. Paddy's Day. I'm Mary Kupczynski, the CEO of RegAlytics, with your update on this week's 25,378 regulatory alerts. And I don't know if I'm going to get through it all. There's way too much cool stuff to talk about, but in good news, our data is beautifully structured, which means I can throw it into a lovely pie chart or a heat map for you with your logo on it. So reach out to me if you need help building regulatory solutions for others. 240 bills were passed last week, which puts the United States at 1,659 new state laws. And please know that I do carve out the past resolutions when they're declaring things like Thursday is Jeans Day or something fluffy like that. In terms of introduced bills, it's New Jersey in the lead with a whopping 7,649 introduced bills this year. But what really matters are the bills that pass. And with past bills, New York is in the lead with 372. And what? South Dakota is in second place in America with 158 passed bills. Is at 16. Governor Nome, what are you doing? You are not going to win least regulated state if you keep this up. The regulator of the week is the SEC, which is still on fire every week with more final rules. And this week, the SEC put out the final rule for the enhancement and standardization of climate-related disclosures for investors. This is a hotbed issue. We've got lots of political vitriol on both sides, but I'm going to break it down as to what is actually happening from the perspective of each side with an understanding that there's always plenty of gray in between and plenty of places for compromise. Some feel that forcing public companies to issue climate disclosures is specifically for the purpose of activists and climate protesters to force companies to be shamed into scaling back, let's just say, pollution, okay? On the other side, there are some very practical reasons for companies to disclose climate-related issues that impact their business. Why? Well, if you're selling water and there's a global water shortage coming, it's important to keep your investors informed about how you intend to maintain your supply of water, as well as charge accordingly for your water. So the other camp of this is saying, hey, it's not good for companies to bury climate risks when there's some serious concerns from investors about where they want to put their hard-earned money. And it is a balance. It's a balance between protecting investors who are putting their retirement savings into these companies, but it's also about not putting an undue burden on commerce, meaning if the disclosures have absolutely nothing to do with business operations, why would the SEC force them to be disclosing a bunch of not applicable stuff? In the end, the final rule will, and I'm reading this to you from the law, not from a news source. This is the law. It will require publicly traded companies to provide certain climate-related information in their registration statements and annual reports. The final rules will require information about a registered climate-related risks that have materially impacted or are reasonably likely to have a material impact on its business strategy, the results of operations, or financial condition. In addition, under the final rules, certain disclosures related to severe weather events and other natural conditions will be required in a registrant's audited financial statements. Why else is the SEC the regulator of the week? Well, they busted another crypto, Shapeshift, which has its own controversy that I'm not going to get into. But also the Coinbase manager who was caught for insider trading was fined over $800,000 in disgorgement, meaning he had to give up what he had earned, and then a $1.6 million penalty. The topic of the week is one I'm honestly, personally very excited about, and it's the topic of private equity in healthcare. And I'm not sure if any of you have noticed, but I certainly have, that for the past, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, pretty much every private doctor has sold their practice to some sort of giant behemoth of a healthcare company that is invariably owned by private equity. What does that mean? Well, private equity is where investors buy out a portfolio of companies, meaning more than one, with the intent to create synergies. Synergy is where, for example, you buy three companies and all three have a lawyer and a human resources manager and an IT department, and you slash everything down to one lawyer, one HR person, and one IT person. And voila, three companies are all producing the same revenue, but it costs less to service it. Well, the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services have jointly launched a cross-government public inquiry into private equity and other corporations increasing control over healthcare. And this is their words. Private equity firms and other corporate owners are increasingly involved in healthcare system transactions, and at times, those transactions may lead to a maximizing of profits at the expense of quality care. The inquiry will be looking into how these profits work and whether they're threatening patients' health, worker safety, quality of care, and or affordable health care for both patients and taxpayers. I, for one, am glad that this investigation is happening, but that's me as a human person, not necessarily as a corporate officer or someone who has to clean up the mess or answer to the regulators. And since we're on healthcare and accountability, the FTC and 10 states just sued Cancer Recovery Foundation International, also known as the Women's Cancer Fund, and Greg B. Anderson, alleging that they collected $18 million from generous Americans between 2017 and 2022, but they only provided $194,000 in financial support for cancer patients, literally about a penny of every donated dollar. According to the lawsuit, Anderson pocketed $775,000, which is nearly 4 times than what the charity gave to the women battling cancer. And in addition, the for-profit fundraisers that he had hired grabbed $15 million, which is 85% of the total. If it's true, it's gross, and I'm glad they're being investigated. Speaking of nonprofits, Wyoming is on a continued tear in relation to digital assets, but a good tear. This week, they finalized the Wyoming Decentralized Unincorporated Nonprofit Association Act, which allows formation and management of decentralized unincorporated nonprofit associations. And last but not least, Arizona Republican Andy Biggs introduced the Modernizing Retrospective Regulatory Review Act, which would allow federal agencies to use AI to review regulations that may be outdated, redundant, or contain typographical errors. And I think that's actually not a terrible idea. And that's it this week for RegAlytics. We have the global supply chain of the world's regulatory alerts in one very easy to use place. If you need a solution for anything related to regulation, give us a call.